Rod and I are back with the second episode of the week for We Want Winners. We previewed what the Niners might do in the first round, and now we'll recap what they did in the draft. Rod, it's actually kind of been a pretty good week for Bay Area sports here. The Warriors beat the Rockets without Jimmy last night. The Giants are winning all of these like funky games late, and now the Niners have finished off their draft. Do you think that the Niners added to the good week, or were you less excited about what they did over the last couple days?
I again, I'm striving to be positive, but I I when I look at it, I wasn't really happy with the Williams pick, but then you look at it and it's like, damn, he might be the only one who is able to really contribute anything this season. I was not impressed.
It
Sorry.
seems like there's going to be some guys forced into roles, kind of like how Evan Anderson was forced into playing. Like he had to just take starter snaps because they didn't have anybody. Same with the linebackers last year. So and then with this news that Malik Mustafa is now hurt, and then they drafted a safety. So I think people are going to be put into roles where they're probably going to have to put up or shut up much earlier than you would want to if you were a team that was kind of interested in your postseason hopes here, and that just may not be what we have next year for this team. I will say we were kind of talking about the defensive tackle Nolan as the first pick. He was still there. He was available to be drafted, and my thought was like, well, they'll have a bunch of opportunities to get some of the edges because it did look like some of those defensive ends were kind of getting pushed back a little bit more to the middle of the first round, and that's how Williams was available for them. And they're talking about him being the bookend to Bosa that they've been desperately trying to find since Bosa became the guy. And I think based on everything that we've read, he's going to get the opportunity almost again. Like they need him to be that right away, and he's going to
Hmm.
take his lumps. But the one thing that they said about him is, he is the best guy available to set that edge, which is so important in that defense. So maybe that if they're looking at it that way, he probably was the best pick for that position.
Yeah. I mean, it's the challenge with that though is I you're right, and they are right. He is probably, from what I've seen, and I watched quite a bit of him in the SEC, probably the best at setting the edge. But at 11, let's be real, we're not looking for defensive ends who are good in the run game. Generally speaking, you're looking for a guy who can get after the passer. Um,
Yeah.
at 11. So the fact that you are drafting a run first defensive end is, because again, I mean, that is needed, and there's no question about that. That's what my guy Cleveland Farrell brought to the defense,
Hmm.
and he was good at that. He never rushed the passer though, and that is, let's be real, at the defensive end position in the NFL. Especially again, like I say, when you're drafting that high, you're looking for a guy who's going to get you double digit sacks, and that is just, could he develop into that? I guess he could, but I'm done as a 49er fan. I'm truly done with draft and measurables and then hoping these guys develop into pass rushers. I've seen it too many times. I mean, I made a post the other day of why do I question that logic?
Hmm.
It's because of Todd Kelly and Tank Carradine and Kinwan Bomber, and I've seen this. I've seen this show before. Solomon Thomas. I've seen this many times before. Guys just don't develop as pass rushers in the NFL. You know, the outlier that everybody points to is Daniil Hunter, who I watched at LSU. He was just one of the guys at LSU and developed in the NFL to a double digit sack guy when that was not his game at all. And at LSU, he was a guy who was a was a highly touted recruit who was just a disappointment based on what they thought he was gonna be and his physical measurables, and it's just I have just that's just one of the tenets, Bill Simmons, he has his tenets. That's one of mine is you don't draft a guy who looks good at the combine, but then when you turn on his tape, the his measurables don't match his production. That's just all bad. It never works out. It never works out. So,
So
but
what you are basically saying is what the 49ers are actually pushing. I've seen many quotes from folks who go, "Oh, Kasurik and Sala get their hands on somebody, and this is exactly the type of person who they want and who they can create and who they can mold."
Frank
And
Jackson,
say that again?
Drake Jackson,
Yeah.
same thing. I mean, it's okay. That's what they do. Well, not lately. So, I mean, I guess that's the one thing you can look at all these picks, and I guess I'm too jaded a fan at this point to just to be just look at the thing with rose-colored glasses and say all of these guys are gonna be players. I mean, it just I hope so. I hope so. Let's just leave it at that. I hope so.
We'll talk about the strategy here in a second, but looking at the draft board, after the Niners took Williams, right after that was Tyler Booker, guard from Alabama, went to the Cowboys. Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle, went to the Dolphins. Then the tight end Warren went to the Colts, and then Jalen Walker, the linebacker, went to the Falcons, and then the guy who we had talked about earlier this week, Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, he went to the Cardinals, and then Shamar Stewart, who was the other edge who was available at that spot, who people had rumored to the Niners on different mocks. He went to the Bengals. Is there anybody in those 6 or so post Niner picks who you would have rather had instead of Williams?
Either Walker or Stewart, if that's what we were gonna do, because Stewart is like a Miles Garrett clone in terms of measurables. And I mean, I know it's a lazy comparison because they both went to A&M, but they really are kind of when you look at if you look at them lined up, their tail of the tape lined up, they are basically the same guy. But it's when you look at um Stewart's production versus Garrett's production when it all falls apart. But I
Mhm.
mean, if that's what you're going to do, if you're going to say what we're going to do is bet on his talent, then that's the guy that you go for, or even Walker. Which again, the thing of it is he has all of this talent, and everyone says that he it is the knock is that he hasn't produced as a pass rusher, but everything else would have lended him to be an excellent replacement for um and he does a little bit a jack of all trades, which again, I guess is another thing that you might be scared of is that he's good in coverage and he's good off the ball as a linebacker and he's shown flashes as a pass rusher. But again, he's not done any of those things for a long time. So I mean, like again, if you're looking on production, you probably shy away. But again, I don't know, maybe all of these guys, that's just where we're at in the proceedings is that um there very few of them really are uber productive. Like, and then the ones that were already gone. Like that's not something you worry about with Abdul Carter. I mean, it's
Right.
like, how good can he be? But you're not worried about him not producing because he did. He produced, at a really, really high level. Um, a guy like Mike Green, who went much later, that was one thing you weren't concerned about. It was like the opposite end of the spectrum. If you're a 49er fan, you'd worry about a guy like him ending up being Alden Smith, where he was ultra productive, but he had character concerns.
Hmm.
And that we all know how that went with Alden. There were no problems with what he was on the field. It was just we couldn't keep guns out of his hands. So
Yeah.
that maybe that's just where we're at with it. And that he was the guy, Williams was the guy who they were just the most comfortable with. And I hope it works out, obviously. But he was one of those guys that was in a great position. Guys come out of Georgia all the time who are uber productive. And he just wasn't one of them. So yeah, that kind of
Da-
stinks for us, I think.
Dane Brugler said Williams is more toolsy than nuanced and needs to develop a more unified pass rush plan. The individual traits, length, strength, explosiveness, promising toughness and football character, however, are reasons to bet on his upside. And he projected him as similar to Jason Pierre Paul.
Okay. I mean, that would be awesome if he develops into that guy. But yeah, it's just it's just one of those things when you look at a guy's measurables like that, and then you see how he performs at the combine, you wonder why he wasn't able to get all of that put together against college guys. As somebody said, against UPS drivers, he wasn't that guy. I mean, so it's just troubling. It's troubling.
All right, let's look at the rest of the picks. We'll just go in order here by
Mhm.
round. Alfred Collins, defensive tackle, was their second pick. This dude is huge, by the way. 6'5" and 5'8", 332 pounds. Requisite two-gap defensive tackle necessary for the 49ers defense with his girth, incredible wingspan, and arm length. And he's the kind of guy who's going to bat down a pass for you. And Dane Brugler said, Nat plays with natural power. His hands are more heavy than disciplined, and he struggles to root himself versus doubles because of his tall pads. And then we'll talk about another defensive tackle that they drafted who's kind of the opposite of this. But thoughts on Collins, who played for Texas?
I watched a lot of him, and the question I have is he just a two down player? Can he be a can he give you anything in the pass rush, or is he just a first and second down player? Which at where we have been with tackle at the run game, if you get that, that's more than we've had. But it's just in a league that was kind of the opposite. We didn't get, Hargrave didn't really give us either. But he came in touted as somebody who was going to give you pass rush from the inside, which is just where the league is. The fact that it's basically a 7-on-7 league. So everybody is expected, where you start with them is what are they going to give you versus the pass. And he's like a throwback player. He is going to be, I think he can be plug and play from day one in the middle, but what if anything is he going to give you on third down? So that is the question with him. But I mean, it's a solid pick because we, is, since Eric Armstead left, we really haven't had any answers versus a run on the inside. So it looks like they did a good job of shoring up that aspect, at least on the first unit.
And then with their third pick, they took a linebacker, Nick Martin, who was injured a lot last season. Um, Brugler said he's built more like a muscular safety, and he called him an average striker, and his tackle production speaks for itself. But his average length and point of attack strength will hurt his ability to sift through NFL traffic and disengage from pro blockers. That doesn't sound great as far as what the negative is on him. And he also said he doesn't think he has the size that most teams desire, but the athleticism will give him a chance to earn a role as a will linebacker. To get a guy who's regular work as a core special teamer with your third pick is that didn't sound great when I read it.
No, I mean he is basically D winners. I mean,
Mhm.
they are both guys who are athletic, and I don't know if he's as good in coverage as because I mean, people say I shit on D winners. I don't. I mean, he's a good coverage linebacker already.
Mhm.
But when you're asked to replace Dre Greenlaw, whose calling card was physicality and aggression in the run game, and all you have to do is look at the 6 quarters that he played for us last season. He made it was night and day in terms of how we played against the run when he was in there. He was a difference maker. He could, with like alongside Fred, he set the tone for the defense, and it just looked different with him out there. And so you would think that would, if anything, that's what they would be drafting specifically for. Not another athletic, smallish linebacker, because Fred is that. And so you're talking about drafting like poor man's Fred Warner's, which I guess is okay, but when you have a definite need, there's something that you definitely need. They're kind of like they drafted Collins to fill a definite need. I don't know why you're drafting generalists at linebacker when again you have a definite need. Shout out to Dre Greenlaw. Sucks that I guess he blew out his quad.
Yeah, I heard about
Um,
that today. That sucks.
that stinks.
This guy
At
can't
least
catch
he
a
got his
break, man.
at least he got his bread. So
Well, how
that's
much of
all
that
right.
bread is he gonna get though? What was his guarantee?
Um, it was a pretty good guarantee.
Okay.
So he'll be, and hopefully he can. I'm not looking at it like he's done. So he's gonna miss a significant time, but
Achilles and
it's not like
quad back-to-back
that
injuries are
sucks.
rough.
That's rough. And I mean he's not a spring chicken. So yeah, I know he's not
So
a Niner anymore, but
Matt Barrows' draft crush, he always does this every year. He studies his draft crush. Was kind of what you were saying, which was a Dre Greenlaw clone. Chris Paul, who I guess
yes,
they call him
from
Pooh
Ole
Paul
Miss.
because
Yeah.
because Chris Paul is the basketball player. But the Rams actually took Paul. So
He's that guy. And then the other one was the that I thought would have been great was the Carson. I don't know, Sweginger or whatever. How I can't pronounce his last name from UCLA. He was a ball hawk and always was around. He was that kind of player. Again, kind of the flip of Martin. The questions for him are gonna be, can he play the pass? And I
right.
guess a similar thing with Paul, but there were no questions about him being a run defender. Yeah, he was on to that one. On Barrows was on the one that one. That guy would have been a great pick for us. Sorry, y'all, for the dogs.
Upton Stout was their next pick, who's a small uh, nickel corner, and I mean, most of what they said about him is just a small dude who plays a nickel, but he can tackle, he can hit, and it's just with Demo and Renardo Green playing on the outside. But I also read that being a rookie, learning the slot is pretty difficult. So that
Mhm.
it comes with a degree of difficulty there.
Again, that's the other thing is I can't judge. I didn't watch any Western Kentucky, so I don't know. But it seems to me that the need still is outside because they gave Demo that little bit of well, I mean, it's not a little bit of money, but they paid him like a slot because that is where he has evidenced himself to be best at is inside. Um, so even with him and Green, they still need an outside corner. They haven't really replaced Mooney. So that's where I thought they would be looking is to draft somebody a little longer and maybe with a little bit more speed. I mean, so unless, you know, my guy, if unless Ramsey is like a real thing that could happen, we still have a need at um a boundary corner. So again, so he'll be in the mix with Demo and like you wisely pointed out that slot is something that seems if that is a position you're going to play in the league, it is something that takes a while for you to get up to speed. You rarely see guys come in and just take over that job as rookies. Because it's such a hard position to play. So we'll see. Yeah.
So this was the other guy I was talking about. Their next pick, CJ West from Indiana, another tackle. Um, he's just more along the lines of size wise, like a DJ Jones. Um, isn't strong run defender who I guess they just expect to join that defensive tackle rotation.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess we're at the part of the draft now. Well, I mean, fourth round pick is still a place where you're figuring in a deep draft you should be able to get. I guess overall, I was just shocked that they weren't looking for more, even if they were lower ceiling guys, that they weren't drafting more um low floor guys, with all the holes that they have. I thought they would be striving to pick up guys who would be plug and play guys. And that just doesn't really seem to be the case. But like you say, it seems like, just based on our needs that a lot of these guys might be just that, might be forced into roles and just they'll just have to take their lumps.
And then they did go finally. They went offense with Jordan Watkins, wide receiver from Ole Miss, and everyone was like, "Oh, he's fast, he's fast, he's fast." And I was like, "Yeah, they've drafted fast guys before, and they still don't throw deep to any of these dudes. So I will believe
Danny
it when I see it."
Danny Gray.
But he did have one of the fastest times at the combine, and he had 5 catches of 60 or more yards last season, the only FBS receiver to do that. So there is promise. The Niners just don't really throw over the top very much. I don't know if that changes things, but he's a fast dude, and we were talking about this during their Super Bowl run. The one thing they missed was someone who could make the defense pay for sitting on everything underneath. So I don't know if he's part of that calculus, but they're bringing in another wide receiver.
Yep. That would be ideal to have, but again, as we see with our guy Cowing, it's just rough to get on the field when you're a young receiver. There's
Mm.
so much that Kyle expects from you. Um, so hopefully he can run the gauntlet and get some run because he's definitely needed.
Back-to-back skill position guys for Kyle. They drafted a running back out of Oregon named Jordan James. Now, his parents did this on purpose, right? My man has the
Mhm.
last name like LeBron James, and he has his first name is like Michael Jordan. That had to have been on purpose. They
He's
just
of that age, yeah.
yes, yes. But it's like Jalen Rose used to say. He's
Mhm.
like, he's like, you don't see too many kids grow up these days named Denzel or Shaq, but you see a lot of kids named Jalen. So there's some good juju in that Jordan James name, I'm guessing. But running back, not known for his speed necessarily, though supposed to be pretty decent out of the backfield and can block. And this Niners offense is really built into taking advantage of running backs who are pretty smart and can learn the offense and can do a bunch of different things. Like we knew that they were going to draft a running back at some point.
He is a departure, Bobby Turner and Kyle have always seemed to like those fast guys,
Yeah.
and that is, basically been with, Eli Mitchell, Garindo, those are on brand, um, picks, which again, so I guess, JP was an outlier as far
Right.
as their backs go, and he um turned out to be a player.
It
It
seems
still
like he's more like JP, but he can catch.
Mhm,
So maybe it's like if JP if they trusted him out of the backfield, he'd have been able to play a little bit more, and they would have been more comfortable with him. And so maybe that's kind of what they were thinking.
could be.
Um, it sounds like he also got the Frank Gore cosign here as well.
Okay.
So they drafted a safety, which when they made this pick, it turned out that it was probably fairly necessary because of the Malik Mustafa injury. I don't know. I'm sure they probably knew. Just the news did not come out until later. But
Mhm,
Marcus Siegel, fast, probably of gonna make his worth on the team on special teams because of his speed, but he can also play multiple positions, and at least he played multiple positions in college. And but they went for speed, and you don't see a lot of speed at that safety spot necessarily.
which is interesting though, because one of the cons that, the 33rd team draft site notes for him is that he hasn't been particularly effective as a deep safety. So, which is kind of strange for somebody who touts, whose speed is one of their attributes, but apparently, tracking the ball and covering deep is not, he's not coordinated in that way. And then also, he's like the opposite of the other guys is that he's he gives you some aggression and physicality and run
Hmm.
support, which is a good thing. I mean, that's definitely something we need, and it was something that Mustafa seems willing, but he's kind of a small guy, relatively, getting trucked by Patrick Mahomes and whatnot. So to get somebody who can possibly give them some answers, it's definitely even with a healthy Mustafa, they like to if they're in their nickel um configuration, they're just as likely to have the fifth DB be a safety as they are to have it be a corner.
Hmm.
So that was something that with Huff gone, even if Mustafa was healthy, that was one of the spots on their grocery list was another safety, who could be that third safety when needed. So he probably was going to get a look see anyway, but now with the injury, whoever him or whoever the other safeties they bring in will it looks like they're going to have an opportunity to play at least early,
Yeah.
depending on what Mustafa's the prognosis is for him in his season. Because the way it was reported is that he missed time, but it didn't sound like they were ready to call the season yet.
No,
So,
everything I read was like some sort of mid-season thing.
hmm
And I guess he got hurt in the last game?
that's last game, and it's interesting, and maybe that's why is that everybody had kind of just rolled up their tents and weren't really, reporting. But it's interesting that if it happened in the last game, um, that it was after the draft that we even heard about it.
I know Indiana had a bit of a come up in college football, but Niners drafted 2 players from Indiana this year. Curtis Rourke, quarterback, who from his numbers seems like the opposite of what Shanahan likes in a QB, though he did play against some really good teams and some really good defenses last year. But when I read stuff like struggles start to pop up when forced to move from his spot, I'm like, okay, what NFL are we actually drafting for? Not today's NFL.
Yeah, when you say the report I'm looking at is limited athleticism, may struggle under pressure, and lacks elite arm talent. I mean, I mean, you don't draft that. I don't think. I mean, I don't know, but hey, it looks like he will be. No disrespect to any of those guys, but he'll be right at home in our quarterback room because all of that's like that's like all with the exception of Brock and I wouldn't say his athleticism is limited, but yeah. So there's not a lot of elite arm talent in that quarterback room. So
He's also going to be like
I mean,
25 by the time the season starts.
yeah. So I mean, that kind of tracks. I mean, because that's what when you look at both Brock and McCorkle, they played a lot of football. So I guess you really can't go wrong with that. That was something that Bill Parcells always
Hmm.
liked was guys who had 50 or more starts. That was one of his checkpoints, which is something that is like the antithesis of what happens now with quarterbacks. Quarterbacks who are going to go in the first round never play that much football because they are on the first thing smoking out of college, so they don't get you know that many starts. So you get a guy like Trey Lance who had 29 starts between college and high school. So I mean, it's it just doesn't happen that way. Anymore. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But I don't know if it was I think it was Nick Wagner who says that, at this point in the NFL, you should be drafting a quarterback every year. Just because. I mean, there's such a limit of them that you should be striving even when you got one like Brock, you should be drafting them to develop them just as pieces. Like we saw um who was it? The Patriots drafted and were able to flip Joe Milton after 1 year because people are just looking for quarterbacks that show any kind of signs of life. So I mean that could be just a good um practice moving forward to throw a sixth or seventh round pick at a quarterback. Again, I just thought it would have been smart. I posted that on Facebook. That I mean, if Shedeur had moved past the fifth round, I don't know why not. Why not just draft him just as a piece? Maybe not here because you're not trying to do anything to undermine Brock, I guess.
Hmm.
But I just thought from a value standpoint, and if you could have picked him up in the sixth round, hell, again, just to flip him, have him go through camp and show that he's the goods. I mean, not I'm not one who is trying to replace Brock. I think he's a good player. Um, but hell, you just again, the quarterback is just such a valuable commodity. If you can get one, kind of dust them off and polish them up and flip them the next year for something more than, so if you spend a 6th round pick and you're able to get anything more than that, that's a win, you
Yeah.
know. But but I do understand there's a personality dynamic, and you don't necessarily, you probably wouldn't want to bring in somebody is with as big a personality as Shedeur. It probably just wouldn't have worked here, but somewhere else, Team X, even if you didn't need a quarterback at a certain point, that guy you should have, I would have considered taking just as a as a flip. But
Yeah, we'll
yeah.
talk about Shedeur in a second, but
Hmm.
like you said, like because there were teams that were rumored to get him to be in the mix for him early, and the Browns were one of them, though they also
Hmm.
drafted another quarterback before him. But we heard stuff like the Raiders, and so they have Geno, but Geno is not a young dude, and it would have been interesting. So you wonder why they would skate out on him, and the
And it's
Giants
interesting,
as well.
like we talked about, Geno or Seattle, who ended up taking a quarterback. Darnold and Geno aren't the kind of guys that make you say, "Oh, well, we got a quarterback, so we're not drafting another one." That just, that's just, they're just not those kind of guys that make you you still would take one if you can, because it's tenuous. Like you say, Geno is kind of is getting older, and Darnold just that is what it is. I mean, I don't, I wouldn't be, he's not the answer, I don't think, to any quarterback question.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
and those guys also probably, I don't less about Geno, but more about Darnold. He's probably better with someone kind of nipping at his heels.
Yeah,
No, he because
exactly.
he's been a career journeyman at this
Yep.
point. So, all right, last two picks. Niners had two late ones. Connor Colby, guard from Iowa. The Zane Brugler analysis was that potential backup in his own blocking scheme, and Matt Barrows essentially said the same thing.
So what's the I mean, anybody else have questions as to why, with the offensive line we have,
It's the only one.
we still aren't? I mean, I, 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 is this just stubborn at this point, that they are just, um they really believe that they can just patchwork together and Kyle can scheme around these guys? I see it in the run game. They have been pretty effective at doing that, but I just don't, when it comes time to protect Brock, there's only so much you can do scheme wise. And when you got guys like, if we're talking about playing the last game of the season, if that is still what we are talking about, when you look at guys like Jalen Carter and Chris Jones and any of those elite pass rushers, you cannot tell me that you are comfortable with Colton McKivitz out there on the island, because they're damn sure that's where they're going to put him. We've seen it. We saw them in the fourth quarter. The Chiefs, they put Chris Jones outside on Colton McKivitz and said block him, and we couldn't. We just couldn't. We couldn't. He couldn't block. Burford couldn't block him. It's unfair to Brock to put him in a position where he has to account for quick pressure. I mean, that just seems like a recipe for disaster when you got a small quarterback like him, because we don't want him taking hits, I don't think. But apparently Lynch and Shanahan, aren't. They're less worried about it than we are, clearly. Crazy.
Last pick, Junior Bergen from wide receiver from Montana. Seems like punt return extraordinaire. That there was nothing about his actual wide receiver skill set in any of the analysis. So
Yeah, exactly, and the one that I'm looking at too, same thing. There's nothing about, anything having to do with the receiver. It's like exceptional vision and elusiveness, threat in the open field as a return specialist, um, special teams versatile special teams contributor, limited experience against top flight competition, will need to develop to contribute as a traditional receiver. So, like you said, nothing about him
you know who looks
contributing.
you know who's kind of excited about this draft of wide receivers who you're like, okay, Tariq Owens, he's like, "Hey man, I may have a spot here."
I might get some run.
Yeah.
If these guys, I'm better than these guys, I'm sure he feels. Um, I guess one thing, that is a departure that we can say that I'll give them credit for is several of these guys, it seems like they drafted have um special teams resumes. So,
Yeah.
that's kind of been that's a departure, from how we have drafted in the past. So that's an exciting, development. So that maybe we're actually that Kyle is gonna, you know, care about special teams at least a little bit.
Speaking of special teams, David Lombardi, he had that they are bringing in the Lou Groza Award winner from Louisiana, Kenny Almendares to compete with Jake Moody.
Okay. I
This
mean, I
dude's got a little bit of a he kind of I don't know how tall he is, but he looks a little bit more like Sebastian Janikowski than he looks like Jake Moody.
that's what living in Southwest Louisiana will do for you. But yeah, I that's interesting. I've been saying since December that I knew they'd bring somebody in. Honestly, I thought it'd be a vet. I know when the Colts that talk came up when the Colts released Matt Gay that he might be a guy that with a lot of experience that could come in and compete. Because let's be real, a rookie kicker is not really the same kind of competition as a salty veteran. So I don't know. Maybe they are just trying to light a fire under the dude, and but aren't really, really, really serious about replacing him. I don't know. That's interesting.
All right, I didn't really follow this all of that closely, but the Shedeur Sanders fall, in your opinion, did this have to do with the people who were promoting him as a first round pick being way off, or did he somehow fall out of favor with teams within like the last week? Because you rarely see a guy projected to be a day one or a day two pick and then fall all the way like to day three. Especially at the quarterback level, it's kind of rare. So I was wondering, you follow this a lot more closely than I do. What was your thoughts on how that happened?
Well, apparently that that meeting that they had with Dabo and the Giants didn't go well. It was kind of 49er fans who've been around a while. Apparently, it was kind of a Nolan Rogers type situation where um Dabo was like going at him pretty hard, and apparently they didn't like the way Shador responded to it. You know, kind of like the legendary stories of
Mhm.
Nolan and Rogers just not being willing to kiss his ass and do whatever he wanted him to do, bark like a dog, and Rogers was like, "I'm above this type shit,"
Right.
and it apparently similarly to Shedeur, that story went around the rounds about this dude thinking that he, being a big shot and not being coachable. I guess, some teams took that to heart. So, but again, it's one of those things where, I guess it's easy to say afterwards, but I remember saying at the time, quarterback is a weird position. He's a guy that those guys traditionally, that's an archetype. Is the quarterback is kind of an arrogant, confident guy, and that's kind of who they've been always. And so it's weird when teams, um, the fact that somebody, Nolan being a defensive guy didn't take kindly to a quarterback who wasn't in awe of him. And I guess the same thing is that's kind of the way teams look at Shador, as somebody who think he's full of himself. But I mean, shit. What if in behind closed doors, what do you think? How confident do you think Tom Brady is? I mean, how arrogant do you think Tom Brady is? Do you think
My
he's a
man had a make a Make America Great Again hat, and it's just sitting in his locker room for to be on video. He's pretty
well, but
confident.
well, I mean, he pulled Giselle. I mean, come on, man. How do you know how confident you got to be to have your to approach a super?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, man. These guys, none of these guys to get to where they're at. And I said that in a post. This like, I would extend that to any high leverage position dealing with like you live in the tech world. I mean, how arrogant are some of those Google guys? Do you think you think Bill Gates is a humble guy? Is Jeff Bezos humble? I don't think so. When you're dealing with high achievers, a lot arrogance is something that you just is kind of baked in to it. So I mean, it's not something that I would ever hold against somebody who is a high achiever. And when you're dealing with those kind of people, it's just something you have to, adjust yourself to deal with. So I
I
think
think
it would
the thing that intrigues me the most is, so the NBA has had to I think deals with this more fairly than the NFL, which is the athlete that is sort of famous before they join the professional ranks. Like, because the
right.
NBA is very much more about, you're kind of out there just in your gym shorts and your face is to be seen. In in the end, in college football, you're behind the helmet. People don't really know what you look like unless you take that helmet off. People know what Shador looks like. They know the type of sunglasses and the jewelry that he was wearing. So it's almost like he was in your face. And in the NFL, it's almost like, well, he hasn't really earned to be in everybody's face yet, which is, this is why the NFL is a little bit of a backward league in a sense to me, because of those things. However, the thing that the thing that I'm interested in is this, with NIL and how all of that works. It's going to be like this more and more with where the league is going to with athletes, because Shador is more famous than half of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL, just from
Mhm.
like facial recognition, and that name, and so you're gonna have to deal with that more and more if the NIL continues to work the way that it does, where these kids are getting paid to come to your school, and then they can actually leverage schools against each other and negotiate in that way, jumping into the portal in that way. So They're going to have to figure out how to deal with this. It's just unfortunate for Shedeur that he was kind of like the example or the experiment in a sense. Rich dad, braggadocious dad. You know, everyone knows the Dion story from when he got drafted. He's like, no, I'm not going there. Nope, I'm not going there. Nope, Detroit, you better not draft me. Like all of that stuff. And so it's just unfortunate that Shedeur was the one who was made the example of this whole scenario.
Well, but the thing of it is it's just lazy from a football standpoint because as a Giants fan and a 49er fan that the whole prime mystique belied how Prime was as a teammate and as a worker and a player. He had the flash and the braggadocious and the Prime thing, but to a man, I've never heard anybody who played with Prime or an organization where Prime was that didn't talk about the fact that he was a great teammate and nobody worked harder than him. So you talk about how out front he is and good he is with the marketing, but he's a player as a player, and Shedeur has shown those same traits. He is apparently a great worker and a good teammate. So I don't know how you allow or you separate those two things with him. Because to me, those other two things are far more important. If he is obviously, it's a problem when you talk about the being a big timer when it gets to where like the reputation that Russell Wilson has garnered about, wanting offices inside the locker room and just kind of being a big time, not giving out his phone number to teammates and, just kind of big timing everybody. Obviously, that's something that you concern yourself with, especially in football, because it is a different ecosystem. But it doesn't seem, I haven't heard any of all the criticisms I've heard of Shedeur along the line. I've never heard those criticisms of him about how he doesn't relate well with his teammates or that he isn't the first one in and the last one out. If you get those criticisms, those are legitimate to me. But the fact that he's confident in himself and he's braggadocious and kind of carries it like Willie Beeman. Hey man, look, I'm not tripping on that. That as long as he's there to be a good teammate and do the work, to me, none of the rest of that shit really even matters.
And then you can argue that maybe what we were talking about, the combine stuff, or he didn't even throw there, but just the idea, the arm strength might not be there. You see the difference in the zip between his ball and Cam Ward's ball. Like that stuff is fine. Like if those are the reasons, I get it. But then the quarterbacks that got drafted instead of him had even more question marks. So it had to be the other stuff versus what his what his strengths and weaknesses were.
Well, because I heard Orlovsky banging that drum in terms of the things that are his strengths are the things that you hear people talk about are the most important, are more important even than tools. Being able to read defenses, being able to make quick decisions, being able to get the ball there accurately. That those things are more important than being able to throw the ball 70 yards or being able to, that is what the lie that they've told us as to why other quarterbacks, toolsy quarterbacks, don't get picked is because, yeah, they can do all those things. They got a great 40 time, they can throw the ball deep, but they lack in being able to actually read defenses or make good decisions or throw an accurate ball. Well, he does all of that. And then, but then the goalpost flips like, well, he's not toolsy. Okay. So Make up your mind. I mean, because that those are the reasons that Jalen Milroe was supposedly a fallen was because of all those other things. Is that he, his decision making is questionable, and he's all over the place accuracy wise. I mean, that's not being able to be accurate with the football as a quarterback is kind of a problem. And the everybody now talks about how Josh Allen couldn't hit the broadside of a barn and then kind of figured it out. But I would say he's an outlier because I can think about a whole lot who never figured it out. And that because that was one of the axioms for a long time is that you never become more accurate as a
Right.
passer. It doesn't happen. So that was what they were, last year with Anthony Richardson's was that was the knock on him is that, he could throw a beautiful deep ball, but then would miss check downs, and that came to pass. He could not, you know, they would give him layups, and he couldn't hit the layups. It was just maddening. And then when he throw a 70-yard dime, which just it's like a dude who can hit 3-pointers but can't make free throws. It doesn't make sense, So yeah. So I hope that just from a narrative standpoint that he is able to prove his naysayers wrong to whatever extent that even really matters. But yeah,
Yeah,
it was interesting to watch.
I'll end with this, which is I think the unfortunate thing is his naysayers are going to move the goalpost no matter what because
Oh, yeah.
that the amount of prospects who turn into A1 quarterback, quarterbacks who then get a max deal or whatever, like
Mhm.
he I think that probably the it's against him to actually become that just because it's so hard to do that. You see the lack of talent in the current NFL of guys who you trust to take you to the Super Bowl. So if he was just to get to become a starter in the NFL, that's a positive. That's going to be a plus. But even if let's say he does that, the naysayers will still say, "See, he didn't become the superstar, and that's why he." But they're just going to change the goalpost on him, which is unfortunate.
Mhm. Because, like, I heard the comp that I heard that makes sense. I mean, it's not to me, it's not a slight at all. If he had Andy Dalton's career, I think that's a success. Like you say, because the it's hard. It's hard. And Andy Dalton was a good player for a long time. I mean, so that to me is not a slight at all. But like you say, just because of who he is and who his father is, that would be seen by some as a disappointment, I would imagine. I don't know, but that it is ridiculous to me.
Yeah, ball out. He's going to be successful in his life, even if he does not succeed in the NFL. So
Absolutely.
he'll have the last laugh. Okay. Last thing I just wanted to mention before we get out of here is the off-season program for the Niners. Currently, they are in what is considered phase 1, which is the first day of their off-season workout program. 2 weeks of activities limited to meeting, strength and conditioning, and rehab. Phase 2 is a 3-week program, on-field workouts and such, and then phase 3 would be what people consider OTAs. So we're talking late May are the actual OTA off-season workouts, and then some early June, and then mandatory mini camp does not start until June 10th. So we got a month and a half until there's really going to be any action on the field. But we'll see what they do and who they bring in to camp and who they're going to add to their roster. And there can still be some trades happening. We have the conversation about Brock's contract. We have the conversation about George's contract, the conversation about Fred's contract. So if any of these things happen and the 49ers actually get some of this stuff done, then you and I will be back to talk about it. So All right, that was fun. We actually got to talk some football for first time in a while this week. So, thanks to Rod and
Oh,
keep.
one thing before we go, I
Yep.
wanted to send a belated shout out and happy birthday to our guy RF Rick.
All right.
Celebrated a birthday. I believe it was yesterday, so I wanted to take the time to wish him a happy birthday and congratulations him on another trip around the sun.
He sent us a note after our last show, and he was just bummed that he wasn't able to watch live. I was like, "Don't worry about it. We're coming back. We're coming back on Sunday." So hopefully he was able to check out both of them. Yeah, I miss the only thing I miss about that 49ers page is really how much uh photos and little videos and stories that Rick found just to keep conversations going. He was
Yeah.
so good at that. So, all right, that is it. So for Rod, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.